new fora, because the G7 must remain a group which is firmly committed to democracy, a unified one, but one which should also lead to new coalitions to allow for a reforging of the global collective system. Let us engage in new forms of cooperation to make strides forward, to take decisions. It is but together that we can effectively push back against all of these inequalities which have eroded our societies. Mistrust, isolationism are fueled by such actions. All of these inequalities that we've let fester and our collective inability to effectively find solutions. No single one of us can effectively combat inequalities, as I described, if this individual is to act alone. In that case, there would only be two solutions. Number one, to always take the lowest standard, to stick to the status quo. That's what we've done for 10 years. Trade war? Fine. Lessen worker benefits, for an example. Always lowering the bar. Well, where does that go? It simply entrenches inequalities in our societies. And that's what we're seeing now. The other solution would be pointing the finger at the rules. Well, the rules don't work, so let's make our own. Let's close the doors. Isolationism, protectionism. Ladies and gentlemen, that leads to only one thing: heightened tensions. It surely doesn't tackle the inequalities I've spoken of. No, I think it is time to establish a collective mechanism, one for working together in every one of our countries to tackle inequalities, to assess, but also to pool best practices. So I'm proposing that international institutions, the United Nations, but also the OECD, support us in the setting up of this mechanism, which should be driven by the G7, to triumph over inequality. It's the method that has to change. First, review the rules in the area of trade and business, as well as in the social sphere. Instead of working towards protectionism, we should work together to revise the WTO rules. We should see how the WTO can better address conflict, put forth rules to deal with antitrust, the respect of intellectual property, and the transfer of technology to put everyone on equal footing. This year, the G20 in Argentina should produce a credible roadmap for the reforging of the WTO. This is also what we intend to do in the social sphere. Next year, during the 100-year anniversary of the ILO, we also need to reforge the very modes of action, such that those who've been left behind come on board. Those who aren't here today, the great non-state actors who are changing the world, but who are conspicuously absent in the drive against inequalities. For an example, stakeholders in the digital field, in IT, those also who are combating various forms of crime in this field, in information technology. It's time to find new modes of functioning for this cooperation, as well as engaging in dialogue with those from the private sector and internet heavyweights. Then Africa must be given a central and leading role in this newly formed international order. It is not just on this continent, rather, it is on this continent that we will either win or lose in the pushback against inequalities. This drive must be done with the African continent, because this is where we see the strongest force of regional unions. It is where we've understood that only together we can tackle the challenges before us. in alliance with Africa, the French chairmanship of the G7 will be looking at all of these issues, but together. You see, I believe that in the face of these divisions and challenges, we must rewrite the code of conduct so as to best combat current inequalities. It is the duty of France, as well as all of its European partners, including the EU, to be in the front lines of this combat, to build a new world order with a human face that knows no protectionism, isolationism, but is entirely realistic. And at the same time, building as a mediator these new rules of the new global order. Ladies and gentlemen, at a time where our collective system is falling apart, sadly, it is most in demand. For that reason, we shall support those working for peace and humanity. UNESCO, its conscience, if you like, of the United Nations, the Human Rights Council, the International Criminal Court, UNRWA, to whom we continue to contribute. As I remind you here, the idea at the end of the day is allowing hundreds of thousands of children to go to school. That's it. We intend to defend the broadening of the Security Council in the 2 member categories to ensure that the composition reflects current balances and that the Council remain a place of cooperation and rather than obstructionism. We will ensure that by the end of the year, the General Assembly, 2/3 of its membership, be able to support the limitation of the veto right in case of mass atrocities. We shall defend international humanitarian law in support of those risking their lives to assist civilians on the ground by negotiating, in each and every case, humanitarian access. During the anniversary of the 1948 Declaration, we were reminded that human rights are not a cultural fact, negotiable values. No, they are fundamental values enshrined in international treaties as committed to freely by this very assembly. We recall that the universality is compatible with the sovereignty of peoples and is indeed the only way to preserve and ensure people's enjoyment of their fundamental rights. France shall remain there to ensure that the world not forget that nationalism always leads to defeat, that if courage is lacking in the defense of fundamental principles, international order becomes fragile, and this can lead, as we've seen already twice, to global war. We saw that with our very own eyes. On 11 November 2018, Forum in Paris will be a time for a melding of the minds, to find that courage again, to find what unites us here. It's to be an opportunity to renew our firm commitment to the preservation of future generations from the scourge of war. It is my intention to take with other interested parties new responsibilities. Over the course of the forum, we should identify the actual ways and means to achieve lasting peace. Friends, I know you may be tired of multilateralism. I also know that the world is flooded with information and one becomes indifferent. It all starts to look like a big show. It all starts to look like even the worst things can become trendy. And it it becomes difficult to extricate the cause from the effect. Well, this is not a matter of being trendy, ladies and gentlemen. For those who've brought us here, we have a duty. We must never forget that genocides, which led to you being here today, the very genocides which are even fueled by certain divisions that I spoke of earlier, and indeed the erosion of the global order, which I spoke of earlier, all of this happens because we turn our heads and we remain complacent. But that is not what I intend to do. No, that is because I come from a country which is, yes, we've made a lot of mistakes. My country has made a lot of mistakes. But it is a country which at every turn of its history and in international history has thought of that very principle of universality. And so please, don't get used to it. Don't become indifferent. Do not accept the erosion of multilateralism. Don't accept our history unraveling. I'm not getting used to this, and I'm not turning my head to it. Our children are watching. Let us address the crises. Let us work together to combat all of these inequalities. But let us do this on a human level and mindful of the principles guided by our history and the principle of universality and universalism. That is my commitment to you, and I count on you.
الجمعية العامة أشكر فخامة إيمانويل.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I thank His Excellency, Mr. Emmanuel Macron, President of the French Republic, for the statement just made. May I request representatives to remain seated whilst we greet the Head of State.